Hey everybody, this is a clip from the latest episode of the Randi Rhodes Show.
Things I thought he should be doing now, and suggested how I thought he should go about doing. He should fully implement the Defense Production Act. He should appoint at the same time a supply commander who controlled it all. He should create a Bank Defense Production Act because the big banks don't want to lend to small businesses. He should exponentially ramp up drug testing, and he should open up a new enrollment period for Obamacare. And I thought he should collect a lot more data and make it mandatory, the collection of data nationally on those African Americans who are contracting the disease and dying at a much higher rate than other folks.
Now that's true. That is just a fact. Now you have African Americans dying at 3 times the rate of counties that are whiter. You have counties where the rates of death of white residents is 6 times higher. Now, why is that? Milwaukee, where they had this off-the-hook freaking, a charade of an election, which, by the way, you won't get the results for Wisconsin's pandemic election until next Tuesday, I think. Monday or Tuesday, the 13th, whatever day that is. That's when we'll get the results. And trust me, that's going to be contested. No matter what it is, somebody's going to contest the results of that election because too many people had asked for absentee ballots, didn't get them, didn't receive them, and then could not vote in person. So that's just a cluster F waiting to happen next week, okay? But Milwaukee is the largest city in Wisconsin. I used to live there. I worked there. You know that. I don't have to go through it. But African Americans account for 70% of the dead in Milwaukee, but just 26% of the population. The disparity is very much the same in Louisiana. 70% of the people who died were black, although African Americans make up just 32% of the entire state of Louisiana's population. Michigan is the same. New Jersey is the same. New York is the same. African Americans account for 33% of the cases, 40% of the deaths, except they comprise 14% of the population. Detroit, where African Americans make up 79% of the population, are dying 4 times faster than white Americans. And in Illinois, there is a disparity that is almost identical to Michigan. But when you just look at Chicago, black residents have died 6 times the rate of white residents. 118 reported deaths, 70% were black. Now, they're going to tell you that it's because, somehow blacks have greater instances of diabetes and heart disease and lung disease. Well, that's well documented. But do you know why that is? That is because they don't have access to health care. Why is it 3 or 4 times more for black communities as opposed to white communities? It's called growing up without health care. It's called growing up poor, and it's also called doing public jobs like trash collectors, police officers. Our Surgeon General, Jerome Adams, is 45 years old. You've seen him. He is 45 years old, and he said, I shared myself personally that I have high blood pressure, that I have heart disease, 45 years old, and spent a week in the intensive care unit due to a heart condition, that I actually have asthma, and I'm pre-diabetic. And that's because I represent that legacy of growing up poor and black in America. meaning without access to good health care, meaning with higher unemployment rates, meaning no health insurance, meaning taking public, jobs like trash collector, meaning, being out in the population, meaning coming in contact with sick people. There's an expression that when America catches a cold, Black America catches pneumonia. And that used to be, an aha thing. But now it's real. That is what the cause of death is. It's double pneumonia. This particular disease attacks your lungs. And if you already have a weak heart, or you already have weak kidneys, or you already have a weak organ, and it's being deprived of oxygen, you're going to die at a higher rate than people who don't. And that is an institutional failing of the United States of America, and it's classic racism, and everybody understands that, including this president, who may not want people of color or immigrant communities to have access to ballots. That is how evil and ugly this might get. You have entire communities that don't have the same access to housing, that don't have the same access to medical care, that don't have the same access to employment, which means they don't have the same access to health insurance. It is not poor people in general can't Skype into work. They don't have jobs that allow them to call it in, phone it in. Okay? A lot of people live in very polluted places. And that is why there's such a high incidence of asthma in poorer communities. Chicago, for instance, health experts said that Black people are more likely to have respiratory problems. Environmental pollution, limited access to doctors causes a higher incidence of respiratory problems. Diabetes and high blood pressure, that's limited access to decent diets, to clean food. And poor people, white and Black, all know that's true. When I was poor, my diet consisted of red stripe bologna, ketchup in hot water, and saltines. And then I loved the little cans of sausages, the little Vienna sausages. And you'd smash them on a saltine and eat them for dinner. There's also this institutional racism that exists in doctors' offices. One study that was highlighted by NPR actually showed, and we know this is true with women, because we know that there's a higher incidence of Black mortality in women giving birth than there is for white women. But doctors have also been less likely to refer Black individuals for testing when they come in with symptoms like fever, coughing, and trouble breathing. And in some low-income neighborhoods, it takes longer to get a test than for a white person. And for me, I don't have access to a test. So can you imagine that you're poor, you're living in a place where there's you have no health insurance because there's no access to a job that provides insurance. And so you have to go to a clinic, or you have to go, to a doctor, and the doctor doesn't refer you to a test because there's limited access to tests. I got news for you. Any attempt to limit this virus depends on everybody getting a test. Everybody. And we're just now starting to understand what it looks like out there for the poorest people, for the people who have the most public jobs, for people who live in overly polluted or overly dense areas. You look at Queens and the Bronx in New York, which has the highest rates of hospitalizations. That's where I grew up. I grew up in Queens, okay? It's also AOC's district, which is interesting, just as an aside. But those are heavily immigrant communities. Those are communities with a lot of African Americans and a lot of new Americans, let's say, immigrants. And that is... Hey everybody, this is a clip from the latest episode of the Randi Rhodes Show. If you want the full episode, you can watch live on Free Speech TV, Dish Channel 9415, DirectTV 348, Sling, Roku, and Apple TV.